Hi everyone, my name is Jerry Wise and I've been a life and relationship coach for many years. I've also served as a therapist, a social worker in a psychiatric practice, chemical dependency treatment, and been a pastor and many other things in my life. And now I'm helping people with life and relationship coaching using the Bowen Family Systems model of helping people learning to self-differentiate. And I hope that you will join my YouTube membership that we have now. We have memberships on my website. We have memberships on YouTube now. And we're going to be doing more on YouTube and even doing some live programs streaming on YouTube and Facebook. So we should be doing that soon. And we'll be notifying you when that's going to be happening. Again, it doesn't cost very much to be a member, a couple of dollars on YouTube, and it sure helps for the production of the videos and things such as that. And there are other benefits you get with being a member. I work with adult children of alcoholics. I work with adult children of narcissists, other adult children issues, codependents, family problems, business organizational problems, executive coaching, career coaching, and life coaching as well. I've done many things in these 40 years. This program is entitled 5 Things Codependents Miss in Their Recovery. I've been a recovering codependent for many years, since the early 80s, maybe even the late 70s. So that tells you kind of how long I've been around. And, and I'm a very strong supporter of the 12-step program of CODA, Codependence Anonymous. I've done workshops on codependency. I've run therapy groups for codependents for many years. So I've literally worked with thousands of codependents over my career. And after doing this work, I'm aware of at least 5 things that are not taught or are overlooked in the recovery programs that people have been practicing and in their own personal recovery work. And certainly I was lacking these things as well. And today I want to discuss 5 of them. There are probably more, but at least I want to discuss a major 5 of them. The first is growing yourself up. Having been in recovery many decades ago, I understood how I should see my codependency as a problem and that it was something I should stop. I didn't want to be a codependent. I knew that was a problem. I became aware of it, came out of denial, and I was looking for tools and for techniques and methods to stop being codependent. I knew inner child work was important and that doing some inner work on me would be healing and would be recommended early on when I was in my beginnings of my recovery. In fact, I did a whole workshop on the 3 stages of recovery for ACOAs and codependents. And actually, I'm kind of talking about the 3rd stage of that without going into all of those things. But it's the 3rd stage that I think so often gets missed in a recovery program. There were a couple of things missing from what I read and researched. How do I change my immature paradigm? How do I move from the primary task of stopping my codependency to maturing and growing up inside, becoming more detached, becoming more of an adult, and in some ways becoming more normal and happy? And insight, research, group support, and even therapy seem to mesh with some of these important dynamics. And how do I change how I see the world, my emotional state, and my emotional functioning, my family, and how my relationships work? How do I change my subjectivity, how I know and see things? Not just what I see, but how I process it and how I see it. And that's what I was very interested in. And I didn't find a lot of information about that. And one of the key things that I think is important to remember is the emotional field and the emotional awareness that you have and how you see the world will define your recovery process. Well, if that is limited, then it may limit your recovery program and limit how far you can go in your recovery. It certainly was limiting mine. And I was trying all different kinds of things. Most of us can imagine our recovery will fit our model of awareness and understanding of relationships and ourselves. If we come from a dysfunctional home, often our recovery is dysfunctional. That's not so amazing. If we're broken, we often will have a broken recovery. And most people think, well, I just recover and then I'm not broken and then all the world's open. And I didn't find that to be the case. That I would use what I got and have been given throughout the generations to me and use that as the box of my recovery. So I could make progress, but it still was kind of within that box. I wanted to change the box. And I was looking, how can you do that? There were a couple of things missing from what I read and researched. How do I change my immature paradigm? How do I move from a primary task of stopping my codependency to maturity and growing up? As most of us can imagine, our recovery will fit into our model of awareness and understanding of relationships and ourselves. For example, many of you have been to meetings. I would imagine there's a lot of people that's been to AA meetings, Al-Anon meetings, codependency, recovery meetings, ACOA meetings. There are even a few narcissistic abuse meetings, adult children of narcissists. And when you go to these meetings, it seems like there are many participants who are stuck in recycling. Often they don't appear to be growing up or in many ways not recovering. Now they believe they are. Well, within their box, they believe they are. And we look up and go, well, why are they just so immature? And they've been going here 5 years and they don't seem like they've progressed hardly at all. I'm not judging other people. I know how difficult that can be. It's not about a judgment. It was about awareness I had. And I'm going, if you've been in recovery for 20 years, and you haven't grown up yet, you've learned a lot about recovery, and that's good, but you haven't really grown up. You don't really see certain relationships in a certain way, and your paradigm's still kind of stuck on what your family of origin had. It's kind of like, have you really done all that you can do in your recovery? And some would say, well, they're just not following the program, the 12-step program enough. If you just follow it more or do it more. But they believe they are, that they are recovering but they're using their distorted, immature, dysfunctional family model to judge their recovery. And that's what we did. And that's what I did. I used that model that I had within me to judge how I was doing, but I wasn't able to grow past that. Their recovery model is driven by the unresolved family of origin issues. Their recovery is often limited by these issues as well. And again, I'm not putting anybody down. I was there. I understand that. I'm still there. I'm still growing. I haven't become perfect by any means, or perfect in recovery, but I don't know if any of you have had that awareness, but that was kind of my awareness. I thought, what's the limitation here? A growing up model helps us to see self-awareness, self-definition, and self-regulation as the goal versus just pinging back and forth of our recycling. That's us stuck in this little box. Rather than gaining self-awareness, gaining self-differentiation, and gaining a systems thinking or self-regulation. I came out of denial early in my recovery. I was offered hope and healing from the past hurts and over-functioning behavior that we as codependents will often do, and the fear and the shame and the guilt. All those things were present. And I even learned to do some self-care, which was absolutely critical. to my recovery. But I think of that as stage 1 and moving into stage 2. Nobody told me about a stage 3. But it did not offer a way for me to learn to self-differentiate within the system. See things in a systems way. See my part in relationship systems. See their part in my relationship systems. And to grow up beyond an introduction to codependency books and 12-step programs, which again, I'm a strong fan of and encourage for people. We can only grow as mature as our box or paradigm will allow. And I didn't know there was that delimiting factor or limiting factor. I didn't know that I can't know what I don't know. And so I wanted to learn, how do I learn what I don't know? And I'm going to tell you how that began. I wanted to change or expand my box. There seemed to be little help out there until I found a family systems approach or a Bowen family systems approach to help me. Oh, this is what maturity is all about. This is what growing up is all about. This is the work of self-differentiation. Well, no one ever said that to me in the recovery community. None of the books even talked about that. If any, they just touched on it lightly. Secondly, a thing I believe that's often missed in codependency recovery is understanding systems feelings. I believe the conventional wisdom is this: all feelings are equal and should be valued all the same. Whatever feelings are just feelings. You don't make them happen. They just are. Just let them be, and they're all equal. And that's kind of what I thought. And that we should treat them all the same way. If I feel guilt, then I should try to overcome it or get rid of it. If I feel abandoned, I should love myself and not feel this way. If I feel shame, I should do shame recovery so that those feelings won't keep coming. If I feel hurt or rejected, I should just realize I'm not being rejected. And then, or if I am being rejected, to just ignore that. I should simply forgive myself and these emotions would not be there. Well, the difficulty was they just continued to be there, and I continued to recycle. I continued to have reactivity that I thought, this is not changing it. I am doing better, and I am doing much better than when I was in denial of codependency, but it wasn't the progress I was hoping to make. In my early recovery for codependency, I did not see how relationship systems caused feelings or triggered these feelings in me. I assumed that they were just my deep, unhealed emotions. I thought of them outside the relationship system, not actually living inside the relationship system. I did not even see these things in terms of systems or how they operate emotionally. And so some advice was, well, you need self-understanding. You need to see yourself as common humanity, that we all feel the same. We all have feelings. We all have guilt. We all have abandonment. We all have... and some will talk about, well, you need to earn your forgiveness, taking responsibility, apologizing and making amends, asking for forgiveness from your higher power, just do better, just have self-compassion. And again, all of these are correct. They're not wrong, but they leave out a systems paradigm and a systems element. Also, I didn't read anywhere, for example, in which someone was writing, when you feel guilt, there's true guilt, family guilt, societal guilt, spiritual guilt, and false guilt. I used to teach all of these types of guilts when I did pastoral counseling workshops. And, because everybody felt, well, if I just feel guilty, it must be God, it must be me, and that every feeling is equal of value, so I have guilt and I need to resolve it somehow. But false guilt is really common. Or, and no one even mentioned on here, systems guilt. And I had no understanding of systems guilt. If you get a better understanding of that, you can get a different reframe and a different framework. It starts to change the box that we're in. There are true feelings and there are systems feelings. Systems feelings began long ago in our family of origin growing up, but they also reoccur in our adult relationships. They are feelings we have to maintain. There are feelings that we have to maintain the equilibrium, status quo, homeostasis of the relationship system, and that we have adopted growing up and were bequeathed to us. I will give you an example. Let's say Dad's a narcissist. He makes unrealistic demands and has for years. He expects me to feel guilty when he is displeased, so that I will continue in the role of subservience, and beholding to him as my father. When I feel this guilt, is it true guilt? Is that true guilt? No, it's a false guilt. No, it's a guilt that is to be experienced by me to keep the system or the relationship balanced and not to disturb it. In other words, he does this, I feel guilty, I get reactive or whatever I do, and that keeps the status quo of the relationship. It doesn't change. And so that's how that works. And I'm supposed to have that guilt because the guilt plays a role in our relationship. It's not just something that comes up with me apart from him. It plays a role in our relationship, and I want to know what that role is. These feelings are not true feelings. They are symptomatic or systems feelings built into the relationship system to keep the status quo. A husband says, well, you're just too sensitive to his wife. And then the wife feels guilty for being so sensitive. And it keeps the wife controlled so they don't question my sensitiveness and not stand up for myself. So I just feel guilty, or I just feel hurt or rejected, and then I don't do these other things in the relationship because that keeps the relationship in the same patterns that it's supposed to stay in. This keeps him in his place, me in my place, or her in her place in the relationship system. I believe a systems understanding of feelings is especially important for later codependent recovery, even earlier codependent recovery. And then thirdly, and by the way, I have 5 that I wanted to share today. Thirdly is the pendulum life. Nobody really described that for me or helped me to understand the pendulum life. And I have a video on that. I have a video on systems feelings. I have a video on all the topics that I talk about. But that pendulum life is the experience of going back and forth between either making peace and reactive distancing or resentment to gain some distance because we feel caught in our codependency. So we might be over here in compliance, over-functioning, peacemaking, and then we'll slip over here to resentment, hurt, reactivity, and we'll go to 180 degrees. Well, if 0 is sick, 180 degrees is still sick. What we want is the 90-degree mark. That's what's maturity and healthy. And nobody ever really kind of explained that to me. I would just swing back and forth and say, well, I'm making progress. I'm moving, but I just keep moving back and forth. And so that's the recycling that we will do. This idea keeps codependence on the treadmill of recycling over and over again, bouncing between enmeshment and cutoff or avoidance, even tricking us into thinking we are making progress versus really we're just swinging from fusion from peacemaking to enmeshment and fusion to distancing and avoiding. Both are fusion, both are enmeshment, both are codependent. They just are different sides of the same coin. Just like when I say and ask people, what is the opposite of love? And people will say, hate. And I go, oh, no. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is neutrality, or I don't care. Hate is a part of connectedness. It is a moving toward someone. Love is connectedness and moving toward someone. And so the opposite of that is not hate. That's just the other side. Just like in a marriage, we get married, then we get divorced, and then all of a sudden they hate each other. They're still married emotionally because they hate each other. They were married when they love each other. They're married when they hate each other. And that's an incomplete divorce healing when you do that. And then you have this hate, which we think, oh, well, I'm not connected to them anymore because I hate them. Then you marry somebody else. Now you have the flip side of love for the coin of the first marriage, and you're taking that into the second marriage. And then guess what? 97% of second marriages fail. So that's where a problem comes, because we're just penduluming. Not a word, but I'll make it up. When I was in the early stages of recovery, I thought there was only giving in or being resentful and upset, or peacemaking and distancing, or trying to get closer, then cutting off when it did not happen or I felt hurt. I only saw two options, A or B. A, get closer, B, get reactive. And then I would move away emotionally. I didn't know there was a C option. Nobody talked about that. But in systems thinking, that when you see it in systems world, systems thinking, you understand the C option. And so I only lived the pendulum life, not the 90-degree life, as my friend Carol talks about, being myself while remaining connected, which is really grown up, and that's not easy. A self-differentiated option with detachment and connectedness. Detachment and connectedness. Not too much togetherness, not too much separateness. A 90-degree of togetherness and separateness in those two forces. And again, Family Systems talks about those two forces. Fourthly, let me talk about what also may be missed in a codependency recovery is real detachment with a family systems approach. The 12-step books, 12-step groups, you will hear the word detachment. I hear it lots of places, and that it's a good thing, that you should do that. I didn't find anybody who could really help me with that. Okay, well, how do I do that? In fact, I went on, looked through all the material on how do you detach, and it was like, get a pet, get on with your life. Release, let go. I was trying to think about, it was just like, okay, those are all good things to do, to be detached. Don't obsess about them. Don't, move forward, look forward, let go, forgive, don't obsess, release, start living your own life, live one decision at a time. Notice how you feel unloved. These are all good things, but they're not with a systems understanding. But they're all good things, and I'm not against any of them. And in fact, I found 20 of them and 20 advice for how to detach. And one of them is fairly powerful, learning how to forgive yourself and learning how to forgive them. Forgiveness is a letting go. So that really is a practice that I think can help with detachment. But I think there's a lot more we can do to detach. And how easy it's to do. Well, just stop worrying about what they're doing. Well, okay, I'll just stop worrying about what they're doing as I keep worrying about what they're doing. And it's like, And then they do ask the question, consider why are you still attached in order to emotionally detach. And that's good, but they don't give very much information about why might I be attached. They don't tell you much about that. They say, oh, well, maybe you're just attached because you have some guilt. And I think we are attached and able to not get detached because of many other things and deeper things and even historic things or family of origin things. So the ways to detach in my thinking, which I didn't read and haven't seen out there, learn systems thinking. Nobody ever told me to do that. Learn about self-differentiation. See how you are stuck or attached in your family of origin or triangulated. Do 12-step work, which is very important. And the reason why it works is because it's a paradoxical approach. And it's the inside-out approach. In other words, surrender to gain empowerment. And that's paradoxical. And that's why it's so healing. It almost has a systems wisdom behind it. And that's why it's so effective. Because we're giving up to get and to be ourselves. Working towards inner neutrality by growing yourself up, moving from that inner I don't care, from an immature I don't care. Because so many people will say, oh, well, I just need to not care. Well, I don't care about that SOB. I don't care about them. Wait a minute. Are you just saying you don't care, or do you really not care? Because if you really don't care, you probably wouldn't even be mentioning him or her. Because we're still connected. And when people come to me and they're still angry with their ex and still have lots of feelings with their ex, how ready are they for a new relationship? Because they haven't let go. They haven't gotten to a neutrality or an I don't care place. Becoming aware of systems feelings, learning to see that there are system feelings that affect us, and how do we look at those as system feelings, and what do we do about those? Breaking the family trance, breaking the relationship trance, grieving the loss. That's another thing that is taught out in the recovery community, and grieving is a way of changing that box and changing that paradigm. Grieving is definitely a way. And then there's paradoxical moves, like moving into the symptom or the problem, moving towards it rather than away from it. We're always trying to move away from our problems, and sometimes we need to move toward it. For example, if I feel I am worthless, and then somebody comes to me and says, Jerry, I want you to help me to not feel worthless about myself. Okay, tell me how to do that. And then I tell them, well, it's not a how question, it's a when question. And that if you wanted to know how to do it, okay, I'll show you. Then I want you to write, I am not ready to accept that I am not worthless. And they go, well, why are you telling me to do that? You're just going to reinforce the worthlessness. No. And I'm saying you're already reinforcing the worthlessness by trying to just reject that part of you. Accept that part of you, which is paradoxical, so it can go away. And that's the paradoxical nature of systems help. So that's going into the symptom rather than just always running from it and trying to fix it. You may want to accept your way out of it. Because if you say that 1,000 times, by the time you get done saying that, which I had them write it down, they're going, where did it go? I don't feel that way anymore. They accepted their way through it. Fifthly, the fifth often thing is missed in a recovery program, I believe, is self-regulation. The recovery community does talk about self-regulation. Do this, don't do that. But what I feel gets left out is this self in the system regulation awareness. and mastery and aptitude. It's not just self, but self in the system. And that's what I wasn't getting in the recovery literature and in the recovery books. I was aware of the goal, but I felt I only had half the tools. I had an individualistic perspective, just me alone, but lacked the system's perspective. Though I did not know this, I just knew in my paradigm, I just wasn't growing up far enough or healing more on an unconscious or reactive level. I wasn't as different as I thought I would be. I didn't see how I was caught in many relationship systems, and they all had simultaneous effects on me at all times. If you don't see yourself that way, you're going to be blinded in some ways. Now, you can feel kind of overwhelmed at first, but after you begin to learn systems thinking and systems awareness, and if you write to me, I can certainly send you the books about family systems and systems awareness, that once you get into that mode, you can maneuver so much more with much more clarity and much more maturity. I thought my family of our origin just troubles me by how they act towards me, or in the present even, versus they are in me and I am operating with them in me in the present. Now that's a whole different systems way of thinking about them. My elementary recovery and early self-regulation were not informed by systems feelings, systems anxiety, relationship patterns as a system. I would move from being a victim of others to trying to control others, all in an attempt to control my reactivity and my anxiety, fear, and hurt, while missing my own self-regulation. Our codependency leaves us in an I'm being controlled mode, or I need to control others mode. And even though that may get better, that paradigm just still stays there, even as we improve as codependents. And these modes will limit our self-regulation work. Well, I know I've talked your ear off today, and I wanted to share these 5 things with you. I hope you will follow me on YouTube and subscribe with the YouTube subscription button. Join a membership there. It doesn't cost very much at all. My podcasts are on all the major streaming apps. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also join the silver or gold plan on my website, jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com, and join a monthly call that I have with those members who want to join me on that call, and I answer questions of members who have joined. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a great day, and be wise. Hey, hi everyone. My name is Jerry Wise, and I've been a life and relationship coach for many years, helping people to learn to self-differentiate and dealing with growing up in dysfunctional families. This video is entitled The Trauma of Parentification. I hope that you'll subscribe, like, comment, and join to support making more videos. In joining, you may need to use your browser and not just your phone app. I've found people have struggles if they're not using their browser to be able to join. So not all the apps and not everything on your phone has everything YouTube has. So you may have to use your browser for that. Certainly, we all know children need to be loved, protected, cared for, and have adults take them seriously. But in many families, that doesn't happen. And in many families, they have no choice but to become parentified and take over some non-child roles in the family. And that can be traumatizing. I have many, many clients who have experienced parentification. Parentification occurs when a child takes on adult tasks, and it can either be emotional or instrumental. For example, emotional would be carrying the emotional load of a parent who's not functioning very well, such as an alcoholic father, a codependent mother, and we comfort the codependent mother and are their therapist and support system for that. That's a parentification of the child, because we're not there to take care of our parents when we're children. We can be a comforter, or we can be a scapegoat, or a whipping boy is another way in which we use parentification in the family, and another way in which we are parentified. We must take on a role beyond our just being a child in the family. Parentification is defined as the phenomenon where children take caregiving responsibilities and assume such a role for their parents, siblings, or other family members at the expense of their own needs and their own developmental childhood needs. That's when we are parentified. And so you might ask, well, don't children have to maybe do chores and do, some things? Well, child appropriate and child developmental growth tasks are okay. I mean, certainly kids may need to make their bed, maybe they can even learn to do dishes, but parentification is when you are a child and you're now becoming a parent or an adult. And so it's not age-appropriate responsibilities. So why is it so destructive and traumatizing to be parentified? We lose our childhood when we are parentified as children. We become a parent or an adult when we are still a child. We're parentified and traumatized when we take on inappropriate or high-level adult responsibilities combined with unrealistic expectations. Such as, I had a client who was talking about she was 7 years old. Her mom had basically abandoned the family, living with another guy. Her father was still there. He was under-functioning. Very dysfunctional family. She's 7, her sister's 5. She now becomes the parent for the 5-year-old. Inappropriate, high-level adult responsibilities taking care of this 5-year-old child, combined with unrealistic expectations. She needs to get the child up to go to school. She needs to bathe them and cook for them and do all of that. And then she ends up with being traumatized also by, she doesn't know what to do. She knows if you put bacon in the microwave, it cooks. But she doesn't know the plate gets hot too. So she goes in to pull the plate out, burns her fingers, drops on her foot. Now she has a scar on her foot as an adult. Because she's a 7-year-old trying to do bacon for a 5-year-old. Just not age appropriate. Kids can certainly learn how to use a microwave, but they need help. They need instruction. They don't need to be asked to do it when they're young. We are traumatized by parentification because it depletes our emotional and physical resources as children. And it constitutes a role reversal or a role corruption. Our role in our family to be just a child gets corrupted or reversed. It also becomes the seedbed of the imposter syndrome. And we become who we are not. And we don't feel real, or we don't feel ourselves. There's some excellent research that adults who are parentified will struggle heavily with the imposter syndrome. I'm a fake. If you really knew who I was, if you really knew me, you maybe wouldn't like me. I don't even know me, and I can't be myself. That kind of imposter syndrome happens with ACOAs, ACONs, adult children of narcissists, and it's certainly when we are parentified, then we don't learn ourselves and to be ourselves. Parentification is really a form of emotional abuse and exploitation that stems from neglect. The parents have checked out, and now we are left with the responsibilities. Or they've checked out of some of their own adult responsibilities, or their own taking care of their own emotional, psychological needs. And they put that on us, and then we are abused and exploited through that neglect. And it certainly makes overfunctioning as an imprinted way of life. My needs are banished. And everyone borrows self from me, though I may only be 7 years old. I may only be 10 years old. I may only be 5 years old, or 13 years old. And everyone borrows a self from me. And I haven't even developed myself yet. And our own selves, we're traumatized because our own selves are defined for us, not by us. And so this is very painful and traumatizing. So we spend the rest of our lives having ourselves defined by other people and not by us. And I work with people to help them learn to have a self defined by themselves and not by everybody else. And our identity as children and then as adults depends on our ability to suppress our needs when we're a parentified child. We learn to be quiet, voiceless, and without demands. This creates low self-worth, low self-esteem, and becomes very traumatizing that way. Parentification is a boundaryless experience. In other words, nobody has any boundaries. Children do adult things, adults do children things, or act like children, and children do adult things. There's no boundaries. There's no, this is you being valued, this is me being valued, this is appropriate respect, this is all it's all mushed up. And the boundaries are just overlapped. We all share this big super self of the family. And your role is to be parentified. Or your role is to carry the family, or carry a part of the family which should not be carried by you. And our own self-care is accompanied by intense feelings of guilt and shame. So taking care of yourself is equated with guilt and shame, or connected to guilt and shame. Certainly we never learn to say no, because you can't say no. If I'm 7-year-old and I don't take care of my 5-year-old sister, who else is going to do it? Can I say no to anybody? There's nobody I can say no to. In fact, I just better do it because she's not going to thrive and survive. And we never learn how to say no. And I do like the book, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. I believe it's by Manuel Smith. I've read it a couple times. It's a great book. It really helped me in the beginning. When I say no, I feel guilty. We then are traumatized by being imprinted with this belief: if I'm a good girl or a good boy, if I'm compliant, if I'm obedient, and quiet, and without my own needs, then I will be loved, approved of, cared about, and not abused. That's an imprinting message that we learn from parentification. Then if we're in a narcissistic family, we learn if I'm a good girl or a good boy, compliant, obedient, quiet, without your own needs, you'll still be ignored, abused, and demeaned in a narcissistic family. So it becomes a double down problem in the family, especially for narcissistic families. And I would recommend watching my last video, which is the 22 rules of a dysfunctional narcissistic family. When we are parentified, we end up being human doings and not human beings. And you've probably heard that phrase before, but people really do talk about, I know I'm a human doer rather than a human being. As parentified children, we are also traumatized by being given way too much information than we can handle, while being given less information that we need. We have too much adult information, and we're not given information that would help us develop as children. And knowledge of things, how to cook bacon in a microwave. But yet I'm given way too much information about my parents' marriage, sex life, emotional functioning, which I can't handle, but not enough information to know how to cook the bacon in the microwave. So given too much information and too little than what we need. And many times we will suffer from what I just mentioned and call the double down syndrome, in which we spend our lives using the strategy of try harder, do more, try harder and harder, versus the strategy of letting go and detachment. We get stuck in the pattern of trying harder, rather than maybe this is a situation in which we need to let go, not try harder. And that this gets us into the enabling problem. And I talked with a client, I remember, I think it was a year ago, and she was from, I don't know what state or what country even, and she was still having a 43-year-old son live with her, and she's going, is it my job to create in him greater confidence so that he can function as an adult? And isn't it that my job as a parent? Come to find out, she was a parentified child. Now she has a child who's 43 years old, who can work, living with her in a one-bedroom, apartment, and supporting him, because we just keep trying harder to do what they need to be doing, rather than having boundaries of, no, this is his task. Now, it's not your task as a parent. Your parenting ended at 18. Now you're a mother and an adult. And so we end up being brothers and sisters as adults, not parent and child. That needs to become more even once 18 hits, or some age near that, in which you're an adult, I'm an adult, I no longer can parent you out of these problems. And so he had spent a long time living with her, and he's still, 43 and not functioning and thriving. And we began to deal with that, and it was very helpful for her to think in new ways about parenting and about mothering and about adulting and being mature, both for herself and for her adult child. And certainly parentification can affect our emotional regulation and our physical health. It can cause us to be sick. It can cause us to be emotionally sick when we are parentified. And in fact, sometimes parentified children will be sick as a symptom to voice the pain of the family. Because nobody's dealing with the pain of the family, and it's on the parentified child. that can be a whole nother video in and of itself. As parentified children, we're more likely to become entangled in abusive relationships, victimhood, and martyrdom as adults. And another way it traumatizes us is it creates the foundation for trauma bonding and insecure attachment styles. We find we are bonded through trauma in relationships and have a very insecure attachment style. We want to attach, but we're very insecure. We fear abandonment. We get enmeshed. We're craving love that we never got. And we just hang on and try harder. And then that bond in an unhealthy relationship just continues forward. This toxic, codependent dynamic between parent and child ends up being the basis for our trauma bonding relationships in adulthood with abusers, narcissists, self-absorbed, and low empathy partners. We end up craving intimacy and actually become addicted to intimacy or love because we haven't had it, and we become enmeshed, and then we fear abandonment. Parentification creates sibling relationships difficulties and complicates sibling relationships in adulthood because they see you as the parentified child even as an adult. And so you're supposed to do more to help mom and dad, not us. That's your job. And then when parents age, we can also be drawn into that as well. Well, who takes care of the aging parent? It's the parentified child that is supposed to do that. So they're fine with their underfunctioning. They want you to overfunction. And sorting that out, I would advise getting some help for that. If you find yourself now as an adult with aging parents, you want to be very careful about your overfunctioning, or you'll get drawn into the same childhood pattern you had before. Parentified children also tend to develop a delay in trauma awareness. So they don't even realize they're being traumatized now because they don't have that trauma awareness. It's been so normal. The upside of parentified children as adults is that we are survivors, resilient, and can be self-contained. We learn it's safer to depend on myself than anyone else. So we have that kind of resilience and that kind of strength. We also have the other sides in which we don't know how to get our needs met, may have a hard time having healthy relationships, but we have some upsides. And with almost all things, there are upsides and downsides. Negative things can have upsides. Positive things can have downsides. I would recommend Joanna's Pantazi, Pantazi, her article on parentification and trauma. It's online if you want to learn more. I'll put the reference below in the description. And all of these struggles that I've mentioned are helped by coaching, therapy, books, reading, bibliotherapy, reading, 12-step meetings, support groups. There are, church groups that have great meeting groups for those who grew up in dysfunctional families. And the good news is you don't have to stay stuck in these patterns. That's the good news. There is recovery for you. For the therapists out there, I would have you read Burdened Children, Theory, Research, and Treatment of Parentification. And I would suggest you read Lost Childhoods, The Plight of the Parentified Child. For lay readers, and for those of you who are not therapists, you might want to read Children of the Self-Absorbed, a grown-up's guide to getting over narcissistic parents. And you might want to read Self-Care for for adult children of emotionally immature parents. Honor your emotions, nurture yourself, and live with confidence. That's kind of a long title to that book, but I would recommend that. I hope you will subscribe, join, like, and comment on this video. I hope you'll pass it on to your social network. I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a great day and be wise.
Counseling Associates, and it is live stream night. We are excited tonight to have Jerry Wise as our guest. Jerry is in a place in his life where he's able to give more energy to his practice, to his videos, to the work that he's been called to do. He's more rested. He's going to bring a lot more energy and creativity than he has so far. And he's got a killer subject to talk about tonight. And I'm just going to sort of get out of the way and turn him loose and let him rock you, because he's got some really good stuff. He ran it past the staff today at lunch, and he blew our minds. So Jerry Wise, the foremost authority, I think, on taking the family systems theory and Murray Bowen's theory and putting it into everyday life where it can help people. So rock it, Jerry.
Thank you, Mark. It was a generous introduction. There is a particular topic I would like to cover tonight, and I have a lot of people who are very interested in this particular topic. Let me tell you just a little bit about me in terms of what I do. I consider myself a self-specialist. In other words, I specialize in the self. And I think that's very important because the self is so crucial for virtually any type of healing, from any type of dysfunction, problem, issue. I just think it's such a core place for people to heal, which tends to clear up so many problems and symptoms in their life if they can really do their self-work. And so I do like being a self-specialist, and I like thinking of myself as that. The way I get self-specialist is it does come from a family systems approach view of healing, recovery, therapy, counseling, coaching. In particular, I like the Murray Bowen approach. A self-specialist is someone who can midwife or guide someone towards a real self or towards real self-differentiation. And I think that is such a critical and important skill, and I believe that's someone that I would like people who are hurting to find for themselves. A self-specialist needs to have done their own self-work, and their own self-worth, but a self-specialist needs to have done that work. Now, does that mean the work is ever completed or perfected? No, we work on ourselves throughout all of our lives. But a self-specialist has really worked on that area and knows how to help someone go from non-self to self, from pseudo-self to real self, from, as I'm going to talk about tonight, annihilated self to a blossoming, real, fruitful self. Unfortunately, there are many professionals, as I know from having done this work for like 37 years or so, that there are many professionals who haven't done their own self-work, and they also have limited results in their offices. And I think partly that's because they haven't wanted or chosen or been afraid or in denial about their own issues and their own self needs in terms of becoming a self. And so self-work is also the basis of individual therapy or coaching, couple and marital therapy or coaching, and family therapy or coaching. That self-work is so vital for that. If you can discover or find a great self-specialist, then you will have struck gold. And tonight, I'd like to talk about an important topic that's entitled The Annihilated Self. I like that phrase, I like that term, in that what I find with individuals who have grown up in abusive homes, severely narcissistic, if not sociopathic or toxically narcissistic homes with narcissistic parents, in very dysfunctional families, even adult children of alcoholics who grew up in very alcoholic homes in which it was chaotic, narcissistic, chaos is really the best way to describe, say, an alcoholic home. Those who have grown up in those environments, I find that experience of them having an annihilated self, and this is where they begin. And they have had it all of their lives. They don't feel like they've gotten the memo. They didn't get the memo that everybody else got, who has a self. Their self was not developed, and maybe even in some ways aborted long before it got to be mature or grow or become small. It really did get cut off. And so this annihilated self is what they've experienced all their lives. Now you might say, well, how can you be annihilated self and still be an adult, go to work, pay your bills, those kind of things? Because we can have a pseudo-self. And most of us can develop a pseudo-self and have a pseudo-self to function in everyday life. But a pseudo-self is not the same thing as a real self. If I can give you an example in family systems terms, or maybe a family systems example. Here is a pseudo-self. I can become reactive and tell my boss off at work. And say, I'm not going to do that, and you're not going to treat me that way, yada, yada, yada. Hey, that sounds rather forceful, kind of assertive, if not aggressive, but it sounds kind of powerful. Then I go home to my family of origin, and I find myself having no voice, having no boundaries, cannot express how I feel, can't be aggressive, can't be assertive, feel shamed. Now, I might get reactive. Now, you tell me, what is the self that we used with our boss? Is that a real self, or is that a pseudo-self? In family systems understandings, that's a pseudo-self. Our real self is back there with the family of origin as turning into that child when we go home and are with our family of origin. That's the level of real self that we have. And then some people go home, or can't even go home because it's so toxic. Some people go home and it's so chaotic, so toxic, so abusive, so annihilating that they have no self at home when they go home to their family of origin. They have no self at all. It's annihilated. And what do I mean by annihilated? Maybe I should define that. It means utter destruction, non-existent, vanished, ceases to exist, or, as they say in narcissistic terms, when you've experienced that narcissistic wound growing up with narcissistic parents, it's the emptiness wound. Well, why would they call it the emptiness wound? Because it's the annihilated self. The self doesn't exist. It's a whole. So our self is a whole. And when we have that whole, we have to develop a pseudo-self to survive. And we do the best we can. I'm not blaming anybody for having a pseudo-self. I fully understand that. That makes sense. We have to have something, but it's not a real self. It's a pseudo-self. That pseudo-self will overfunction, underfunction, become overreactive, become underreactive, will get involved in triangles, will cut off, will do all kinds of things with the pseudo-self. And actually, pseudo-self is better than no self at all. But unfortunately, it is a pseudo-self, a not real self. I thought of when you talk about annihilation, there's a physics view of looking at annihilation. And in physics, annihilation occurs this way. A particle and an antiparticle come together and annihilate each other and then become some other form of energy. A particle, a narcissist, or let's say a child, comes together with an antiparticle, the narcissist who wants to destroy yourself and not want yourself to live, be accepted. They annihilate each other because the narcissist doesn't have a healthy self or a self. By the way, narcissism is not a self. It's a role. And that the child then has no self, and then another form of energy takes root, pseudo-self. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to find, I'm trying to exist. And then we end up doing those roles that we are used to. And I've got a couple questions coming in. We will get to those in just a moment. Let's talk about when we have that new form of energy I talked about with the particle and the antiparticle and then creating a new form of energy. It's that enmeshed, non-existing self energy. We become clumped to our abuser or clumped to our family of origin. Oh, we're going to have lots of questions. And that's where I become a mom me. I become a dad me. I become a dad mom me. Or a dad Jerry. Or a mom Jerry. That's that new form of energy that we become. So, again, what is an annihilated self? What a self or person would become if one could not talk, feel, or think. That's what an annihilated self becomes. An annihilated self sees love as enmeshing and clumping emotionally. Because if you don't clump and don't enmesh, you have a self. If you don't have a self, then all you're going to do is clump and enmesh. That's all we know to do, is to glob on to something. Because a self doesn't glob on. A non-self will. Love is enmeshing, and enmeshing equals survival. Because without that, we are nothing. Totally nothing. No thing. An annihilated self has no worth, often full of and guided by shame. Shame is our navigation system for annihilated self. Guilt keeps our annihilated self from venturing to true selfhood or self-differentiation. Guilt keeps you from venturing into health. It tells you, don't do that. That'll be a problem. That's wrong. And then that keeps us in place. Shame is our navigation. Guilt is our boundaries. Both are very unhealthy, very sick, and will keep us in a box that we cannot survive in very well. And the annihilated self indicates or shows that invisibility is a virtue. We need to be invisible because we don't exist. And the annihilated self, for the annihilated self, our gut knowing or our intuitive awareness is not faulty, but it is bad and suspect. It is bad and suspect. Your intuitiveness is bad and suspect. So, also the annihilated self has a paradigm, a worldview, our givens, our inner sense of knowing. All of that is what I consider subjectivity. That's our subjectivity. That also is described in family systems works by Lerner, by, now I've lost her name, Gilbert. Roberta Gilbert, I believe. Peter Titleman. There are many who talk about that subjectivity, and all of that is broken, scary, wrong, hurtful, and dangerous. So everything about your own self-awareness or self-knowing or intuitiveness should all be mistrusted, and it should all be considered dangerous. An annihilated self views it that way. Self-knowledge is reviled in an nihilistic environment. Other knowledge is the only way to survive. Knowledge of other, not knowledge of self. Don't worry about knowing yourself, only know others and what they want, need, desire, demand. That's what's important for the annihilated self. Self is seen as the root of all evil. The annihilated self cannot enjoy playfulness without anxiety. In fact, playfulness can be very painful. And I can explain that more. We can talk more about that later. The annihilated self is over-serious. We know that rigidity, stiffness, callousness, and not enough flexibility is unhealthy for our bodies, our skin, our organs, and all of biology. Over-seriousness is a part of that whole continuum and process. If our emotional process is fossilized, then it's too hard. It needs to be flexible where we can be serious and we can be playful. When we're often over-serious, we cannot be playful and we are rigid and either or, black or white, all or nothing. Ooh, could you do me a favor? I have that book that you and I were talking about today. It's on my desk. The Lerner book. I'm sorry, I meant to bring that with me, and Mark's going to grab that for me. The annihilated self sees all of his or her life as being personally felt by others. Reactions, successes, and failures are all personally experienced by other people. In other words, your failures are a personal ping and an attack on significant others. An annihilated self believes that. If I'm successful, it pings you, and it is personally felt by you. If I have a failure, then that is personally experienced by you. And oftentimes, all of those are considered an attack on other people. Just my being is an attack or personally taken by other people. An annihilated self will experience that. The annihilated self is always, the annihilated self thoughts are always being controlled by others, and they are supposed to be eternally grateful for that. The annihilated self is learned and experienced, and we're going to talk about, I want to read just a very brief quote here, if I may, and then I'll get to a couple of your questions. Children who are raised, I'm going to use narcissists, but that can be true of abuse, toxicity, even codependency, the severe, alcoholism, drug addiction, chaotic and toxic lives of all kinds. Children who are raised by narcissists leave home with unrealistic expectations coupled with the shame they felt when they couldn't measure up to their parents' standards. Yet, there is a double bind, and the annihilated self is totally caught in double binds. Yet there's a double bind that exists. As harsh and unloving as narcissist parents may be, when they deign to smile upon you, it's as if the stars fell from heaven. It's intense, it's absorbing, and it's addictive. Can you see how the intermittent and extraordinary experience propels these adult children to seek out this dynamic in another narcissistic man or woman? And thus it continues on. And research shows that this is the most addictive bond there is. I thought that would be helpful to share that brief quote with you. And then I have one other quote before I get to some questions here. And this is that annihilated self. The annihilated self is learned and experienced as a profound sense of shame because of the trauma of not being seen, the trauma of having needs and knowing they won't be met, the trauma of being alone with no one available for connection. Do you know how painful that would be to a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 12-year-old? And in fact, if you want to know, I want you to think about your own children at their own ages. Think of them as you refusing to see them. Think of them as you refusing to not meet their needs as dependent children. Think of them as them being alone and no one, including yourself, is available to them for connection. And think of them as being in distress with no one available to comfort them. How would your children feel? That's how you felt growing up if you grew up in these families. And that's how you began to experience an annihilated self. I thought that might be helpful to use that quote. Well, I've offered you way too much information. I made a few notes tonight before I talked, and certainly I didn't cover the topic exhaustively, but I wanted to at least pose that for you. There's a question here. Jay Taylor writes the question, how do you deal with a significant other who is a victim of narcissistic and codependent parents? Ooh, I think that's a very good question. One of the ways in which I would do that is I would do some reading and learning about what it's like to be married to someone who is an ACOA. I have a video or two on that might help you. I would read material on what it's like to be loving and caring for someone who's bipolar. I'm not saying your spouse is bipolar. I'm only saying the information is useful. That's all I'm saying. I'm not diagnosing them with that. I'm just saying it's a useful tools to use, because you're going to understand their moods, their shifts, the things that are going on, and also to accept their woundedness and the annihilation of themselves, and how you can be nurturing and helpful. So I would begin to use those as resources in that respect. I also would think about, if I had a spouse who was a victim of narcissistic and codependent parents, I would definitely encourage them to seek a guide or help to them. And I would be very cautious about being therapizing. I might be therapeutic, but I wouldn't be therapizing with them. In other words, because that's only going to trigger their shame and their acute sense of a loss of self. So one of the things we want to be is we always want to share medicine with a spoonful of sugar with someone who's grown up in narcissistic and codependent families. So we say, honey, you seem to believe that I wanted to harm you or hurt you. I want you to know that I love you and care about you more than anyone else and choose you over everybody else. I also want to say, those were not my motives. I do care about you. If you have a hard time accepting that from me, then can we help you talk to someone or find someone? And maybe I need to talk to someone and find someone to help us as a couple. And Jay Taylor, I hope that is a help to you. Maybe not the full answer. I don't know the whole situation, but I want to give you a couple of ideas that you might consider. I have a question, from Jay again, who asks, can that person ever be a suitable spouse? I think everyone could be a suitable spouse. It depends on how much they are willing or open to looking at their self that is annihilated, to looking at their past and accepting that their past has affected them. And again, some people have a very difficult time doing that. Some people are so wounded and broken, I have to admit, it would probably take more than one lifetime for them to heal. And I don't know how to say that any other way. There are some who I think, and again, those who have grown up in narcissistic homes or codependent homes or alcoholic homes or abusive homes are all on a continuum. And so I don't know where they might fall on that continuum. The closer they are to the healthier continuum, the better chance they have recovery. The closer they are down to this other end of the continuum, Charles Manson, Bundy, serial killer, they're not going to get better. That's not going to happen. Most people do not fall down on that end of the continuum. They do fall in the middle towards the top. And so that's how I view people, or at least I accept people as being there until they prove it otherwise to me. Because I like to help people and be positive with them. And also I feel people can. I've seen a number of people who have been severely abused or misused or grown up in narcissistic homes recover. And it is about a recovery process. I mean, if I can see alcoholics and heroin addicts who have totally ruined their whole lives with what they've done, if they have a chance to recover and can recover, could not someone who grew up in a narcissistic home recover? I know that many of them have had annihilated selves go out and replace it with heroin and alcohol and methamphetamine and God knows what else, sexual addiction, gambling addiction, and then they're able to turn their lives around. I think there is a lot of hope. Guy and Jackie, I believe, is who has another question. What do we call someone who always needs others to be happy over themselves, and if others are not happy, then they feel worthless? Well, I mean, I must say that would be kind of my classic definition of codependency. I feel as good as you feel. I feel as happy as you are happy. I feel as unhappy as you are happy. That's a kind of a classic experience and symptom of codependency. And I am codependent, meaning I am dependent on you. I am what do they call that with the, you're the host and I'm the one on there sucking out self from you. And so if you're happy, I'm happy. And that's what enmeshment is. And that's a classic view of codependency. And if you're not happy, then I am worthless. And I feel bad. How many children have grown up with that in their homes? But what I'm talking about in terms of the annihilated self was that the parent doesn't even accept the good that the child does and shames them for the good, shames them for the effort. I mean, that's really sick and that's really psycho, so to speak. And that really is painful and toxic. And that's where the self doesn't develop. For many of us, we grew up in homes where there was some nurturing, some sense of connectedness. And though we might have grown up codependent because there was still enmeshment, still neediness and dependency, but it wasn't quite as toxic as that severe toxic narcissism that people have experienced. So I'd say that's codependency, and we do feel worthless when, I felt worthless when the weather wasn't right for an activity I had planned. I felt bad because everybody was unhappy about what I was doing, say when I was a pastor. Then I feel worthless as a pastor. Well, maybe I didn't do anything wrong. But I took over responsibility for other people's experiences. That's what I was trying to say when I talked about I believe everything I do, say, experience, and live is taken personally by everybody around me. That's the annihilated self-experience. If I do good, then I make everybody happy. If I do bad, then I make everybody miserable. If I fail, then I make everybody shamed. That's a global experience that's quite unhealthy. And we can overcome that. And we can learn to let go of that. Let's see. Is that Arlane or Arane? I'm not sure. Ariane. Arjane. I'm not sure what their name is. I'm sorry. What books would you recommend to help our annihilated selves? I think that's a very good question. I would use, the areas that let me see here. Let's see if I've got, I think I've got a few more notes.
Oh, you better get after those.
Oh my gosh, so what can we do? I forgot about those notes, forgive me. I do have some solutions. I just wanted to talk about the problem. And I'll talk about a couple of books when I do that. So what can we do? Break down our denial of having a pseudo-self and all the years and accept that we have experienced and do experience an annihilated self. We seek out guides and midwives and listeners, not gurus and leaders and teachers who have the answer, but seek out midwives who have traveled the path to help you birth the self. Give yourself permission to talk, feel, and think. Study health and normalcy, or the normal selfhood. For example, one book is by the Friels called Friel and Friel, F-R-I-E-L, What is Normal for the Adult Child. That's a good book on just what is normal. Lerner books, Harriet Lerner on Bowen Family Systems. Jenny Brown's book on growing yourself up. Andrea Shearer's book, The Mindful Compass. Melody Beatty's book, talking about codependency and healing from codependency. Practice self-soothing. That's a practice that can be learned. Or reparenting your inner child. Doing inner child work, seeing yourself as having an inner child and relating to that inner child in a much loving way, not in a mean, narcissistic way in which we learned. There's inner child books by Charles Whitfield, Healing the Inner Child. Reparent your inner child and restore your real self. Accept your, and I do encourage people to accept their pseudo-self for now. It's okay to accept that pseudo-self. That is not a bad self. It is just a replacement for self. It's not bad. It's just what we have to do to cope and survive. Learn to walk away from toxicity and painful others. Practice detachment. Find a support community. Don't take responsibility for the narcissistic, alcoholic, rageaholic, or abuser. Stop expecting empathy, sympathy, or caring from toxic people. Practice self-authenticity slowly and within a family system's goal of, and there's a whole bunch I could talk about there, but I'll talk about that later. Define and secure some self before you start declaring self. And I can talk about that later. That may pique some interest. Remember, it's not about how. Everybody asks me, how do you do this? How do you do this? It's about when. When are you ready to do this? Get help from someone who can midwife and birth your real self into existence. Find a self specialist. Some of the other books I think of that can be helpful. Where's the one I have?
There it is. Right.
Here's a very good book. It is I don't know if you can see this, but it's called The Object of Affection is in My Reflection. Coping with Narcissists by Raquel, R-O-K-E-L-L-E, Lerner. The other Lerner books was by Harriet Lerner. This is Raquel Lerner. Excellent book. Excellent book about self as well. I think those are, there we go, I do see that. So I think those might be some helps to you. I also have a listing of resources that I could send to you if you want to email my email address, jwlearning, JW, my initials, learning as in school learning, at hotmail.com, and I'll send you a listing of reading resources that might be of help to you. Well, I'm sure I probably overwhelmed you probably and shared too much. That's what I wanted to share tonight, folks, and I appreciate you being open and listening and being a part of our broadcast.
Thank you for being here tonight, Jerry. I know we get lots of... Can I borrow your book for a little bit? I wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
I know you have a shorter drive since you live closer.
I do.
And we're just so thrilled to have a rested, energized Jerry Wise around. And I just think that you seem more rested, you seem more happy, and I think you're going to be able to help a lot more people.
I agree. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah. So
great.
God bless you, man.
Thank you, Mark. Thank all of you, too. Have a good night.
So we do have Karen.
Hello, my name is Jerry Wise, and I'm the director for the Center for Self-Differentiation on the north side of Indianapolis in Indiana. I work with clients in my office and via internet for those who need coaching and help. And this video is entitled Mission Impossible, the Parentified Child. Sounds like a big word, parentified. Basically, it just means a child who's been turned into a parent. And certainly children are not supposed to be parents. This video is about a dynamic not often addressed or talked about because it's a difficult area, and a lot of people I find kind of like to avoid talking about dysfunctional things, but childhood parentification is a pretty common problem, and it occurs with lots of folks. Children experience this by living in a role reversal with their parents. The parents are immature or underfunctioning or dysfunctional to the level in which they need their children to act as their caregivers or parents to the parents. And this can go far as emotionally, that they can't function very well emotionally, so the children must provide that emotional neediness and fill up their bucket as parents. Or it can go all the way to the functional and physical ways in which kids actually take care of parents, such as, 11-year-old boys driving their dad home from the bar, or mom sending the child out to go find the father, those kinds of things. And that really causes lots of problems for adulthood when these children grow into adulthood. So how do I know if I'm a parentified child? Well, ask yourself the following questions. Were you made to feel responsible for your parents' welfare, well-being, or feelings? Was your parent indifferent, or did he or she ignore your feelings most of the time? Were you often blamed, criticized, devalued, or demeaned by your parents? When your parent was upset, were you often the target for those negative feelings? Did you feel like you were always trying to please your parent without ever succeeding? Did you feel like your parent took all of the credit for your successes, or they lived their lives through you as the child? Did they ever make comments like these? Don't you want me to feel good? And this is the parent to the child. You make me feel like a failure when you ... Why don't you care about how I feel? If you really cared about me, you would do what I want you to do. And those are just a few statements. There are hundreds of others that are made. Here's a subtle or often disguised example of parentification. It's common to hear a divorced mother who proudly declares that her son, who is 10 years old or younger, has become the man of the house. A divorced father boasts about how his daughter has assumed care of his apartment or house, or meal preparations or housework, etc. Extended family members often remark, well, how cute that is, these children's grown-up behavior is. How very cute that is. When I see it, I don't see it as cute. I see it as sad and troubling that it's going to be a problem for them later on in life. Many of us grew up as parentified children. ACOAs grow up over-functioning when parents underfunction. Many others provided emotional relief or needs to their parents who were unhappy, lonely, or had dysfunctional marriages. Many were abused to deal with the anger and the rage of their parents because the parents did not deal with their own issues from their own childhood. Ann Koss, in her article, Robbing Your Children of Childhood, Parentified Children Suffer Later, states this: Basically, children learn about their world through experience. When they are in a home where the parent is responsible, they are free to explore and make mistakes, while having the safety net of the parents to fall back on. If they are parentified, children feel restricted and unable to freely explore their environment. They worry they cannot afford to make mistakes, that they must be perfect. The burden is enormous and far too heavy for a child. Children who feel responsible for their parents can become overwhelmed. This can lead to depression or frustration or self-doubt or even acting out. Many parents can underfunction, causing their children and forcing them to overfunction. Then the child acts out because of the dilemma and the conflict that they're in, and then the parents blame them for acting out and for how bad they're making them feel because they acted out. And I see that all the time. This experience of parentification, as Ann Koss goes on to say, this can lead to depression or frustration and self-doubt because they feel incompetent to do what is expected of them. Children are asked to do more than they can do. Those who grew up as parentified children grew up too soon. One client, Sarah, I'll call her, discussed her parents and how unhappy they were with their lives and with each other. Dad would check out. Mom was left with her excessive neediness and loneliness and depression. The daughter believed that she should be there for her mother because her mother was lonely and sad and angry and needy. So Sarah thought it was her job to take care of her and to make sure she was not lonely or disappointed in her. She didn't want her mother to feel any more pain. But this just made Sarah suppress her own needs, not live her childhood as a child, and created a Sarah who was highly critical of herself throughout the rest of her life up to her adulthood. Dad underfunctioned, Mom underfunctioned, so Sarah stepped up to fill the gap and overfunctioned for the family, and thus a parentified child. As an adult, Sarah uses her parents' happiness as the ruler for how she measures how worthy she is as a person, how well she's doing by measuring how well or how she makes her parents happy. This drives her crazy, and she feels she cannot stop this. And it can feel very obsessive, and we feel like we can't stop it. The good news is we can. The bad news is we feel that obsession, but it is recoverable. When she does not measure up, she feels horrible and very self-critical of herself. So what is the experience of being an adult of a parentified childhood? Basically, we have shame-based lives. We have guilt-based lives. We live guilt-based lives. Any sense of self feels selfish and appears and we believe is selfish. We can have intense anger that has either been suppressed or depressed or is deeply buried, or we can be angry a lot but we just hold it all in. We are often highly reactive because we now have internalized our parents' criticism or disappointment in us, and also we feel anger as well because of that. We have very little self-care or knowledge of how to do self-care for ourselves because we didn't learn how to play and just be children and just explore the world and explore myself growing up. I had to focus on parents and focus on their needs. So I didn't learn much about me growing up as a parentified child. We tend to be overfunctioners and highly reactive to those who underfunction. We're often hyper-vigilant about external measures of how I'm doing. Do I look okay? Did I give that presentation well enough? Would this have upset my mother or my father? A lack of internalized measurement for how I am doing and what I want or need. We have a lack of those. We don't have an internal ruler. All of our rulers and measuring sticks are all out there, and they're held by other people. We often have major trust issues because love, acceptance, and validation feels like it can always be withdrawn at any moment for any behavior, any thought, or any feeling. And now what's even sad, even any behavior that is assumed or thought that might be there or feeling that is projected onto us, that others can withdraw their acceptance and love and positive regard from us because of what's in their head, which then strips us and rips away how we feel about ourselves. Intense feelings are the real cause of any problem. In other words, we have a real intense belief that we are the real cause of any problem, and that we're the cause even of the weather. I mean, it's our fault. We have over-ownership of problems and causes. And for example, we think about our marriage that's failing, we go, well, it's probably 90% my fault and 10% theirs. We over-own who's at fault here because we don't have a very good GPS or gyroscope to know or to sense what is the proper balance of my responsibility and their responsibility, because we didn't learn that growing up. What we learned growing up is everything is my responsibility. That's what parentified children learned. Therefore, since you overown the problems, you therefore are the only solution. Fix you and the problem can be fixed. We keep trying and trying, but no matter how we try or how we try to fix ourselves, adapt ourselves, change ourselves, we try to be the solution, but it just doesn't fix it. And this is why I call it Mission Impossible. That parentified children are on the Mission Impossible. And that's the name of this video. We have been instilled with the belief that we are overpowerful also. We cause others' feelings to happen. We cause others to reject or discount us. Therefore, we are powerful enough to make this stop. This belief is the omnipotent belief, I'm all powerful, of parentified children. I can make my parents happy and I can make them feel unhappy. I am that powerful. Now, parentified children won't say that, but that's actually the experience they feel. Because if their parent, for example, Sarah, if her parent feels upset, she feels responsible for it. She has the power to either make her mother happy or make her mother unhappy. That's way too much power, and it's not even true. While doing, our reactivity for parentified children, when we become adults, our reactivity is emotionally based living. And it's emotionally based living, emotionally based thinking, and an emotionally based paradigm. It's not rationally based, it's not thinking based, it's emotionally based. We put too much stock in our feelings. While doing everything to be accepted, we at the same time feel like a victim all the time. We are always the victim of our own thoughts, our own emotions, and our own beliefs, and the thoughts, beliefs, and emotions of others. Well, you might say, well, Jerry, how so? Do you mean by that? Well, we are living to try to please others, and when they are not satisfied or made happy by our lives or our behavior, we feel very guilty, extremely guilty. And so we stay engaged in trying harder, to do more. To stop would to stop that would create way too much guilt. If I just let my parents' feelings go and let them have their own feelings and not be responsible for their happiness or unhappiness, that would create way too much guilt for me. And since I can't handle the guilt, I got to stay in the role of trying to manage their feelings, which is, of course, a codependent dynamic. To give up the belief that I can control someone else's happiness would cause too much guilt. So I then become a victim of my own guilt feelings. We continue the pattern into our adult relationships. We choose partners who thrive on our guilt feelings, who thrive on us taking 80% of the responsibility for the relationship and how it's working. We find partners who offer and withdraw acceptance, love, sex, nurturing, approval at their own whim or based on our doing what they expect of us. So what can we do? Well, we can begin to work on not feeling guilty about our situation. We learn to observe and learn more about our situation growing up and about how we function in our relationships now. Becoming an observer, not an absorber, as I've mentioned in other videos. Being parentified was not your fault. You did not cause it. Learn to have a greater tolerance for experiencing your guilt. Meaning guilt is a normal feeling for you. And saying I will feel it when I do that thing that is counterintuitive or goes against what feels normal for me. I'm going to feel guilt, but I don't have to act on it. Guilt won't hurt me, just like anxiety won't hurt you. Guilt won't hurt me, it is just uncomfortable. This unhealthy guilt should not guide me in my decisions. Learn to be a kid again. Watch my video, It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood. That might be a good video for parentified children. Reach out for help versus being all the help to others. Don't isolate, find support. Forgive yourself for any negative feelings you hold about your childhood or your parents and find ways to process them. Learn healthy, normal ways to parent your own children. Read books and seek therapy. Work on resolving your anger and grieving your lost childhood. Make your goal to be a mediocre person and not a perfect person. To be a human person and not a superhuman person. Begin to believe you are not that powerful and cannot make people happy and cannot make people feel a certain way. Whether they feel angry, joyful, mean, happy, accepting, disappointed, I don't make them feel that way. That is their choices. That's what's going on inside them. Become more selfish. And again, this is how it feels when we begin to do self-care. Self-care for parentified children always feels selfish. The same is true for codependents or ACOAs. Once you start doing self-care, it feels very selfish to you. Like I'm almost narcissistic when I do that. But that's because our paradigm is so bent that normal self-care seems like selfish self-care. If you want more help with the effects of growing up as a parentified child, if you want to learn how to grow up within relationships, your family of origin, in your marriage, at work, I hope that you'll contact me and make an appointment. My contact information is on the screen. If you want more resources or a complete listing of over 100 of my videos on YouTube, send me an email. I'll be happy to respond to you. I'll send them out to you for free. I want to thank you today for watching the video and joining me today, and I hope you have a great day.